with about 700 people in the combined rooms between YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and my website. And today has just been a very, very active day for me. Starting out this morning when, as you can see on the screen here, we have a huge stack of earthquakes started to strike up in Alaska. And that's what we're going to be talking about to start out tonight's update. The most significant activity this week and in the past several weeks, and for North America in many months' time. And I would assume that many of my viewers that are tuned in right now are either in the Northwest or up in Canada or up in Alaska. And I would like to point out, one of my viewers lives right here. Ironically, in the most weird twist of fate ever, my wife and I filled out a bunch of postcards last night in which I sent a thank you to the person who lives in White Horse, Yukon Territory, Canada, which is right next to this, and I mean just a few miles away from the earthquake epicenter. First time ever I've ever written to anybody really in Canada, and specifically up in Yukon, never written to anybody up in Yukon. Then I went up to the P.O. box, and I got a box today from somebody from White Horse, Yukon Territory, same person. Sent me a box of stuff today to my P.O. box. It just arrived. So, an earthquake struck there, coincidentally, and I would like to talk about what's going on there. Now, that's just a weird twist of fate. That's all, guys. I'm not saying we caused the earthquake or anything. It's just very, very strange. But this earthquake is a large, large earthquake for the area, and the reason it struck, I think we need to get into that first before what we have to look for next. Now, the reason this earthquake struck, it is not part of the slow slip that's been happening down here to the south. Let's just get that out of the way right off the bat. It is not part of that. So what caused this swarm of sixes, or a couple sixes and swarms of threes, fours, and fives to strike in the location? Well, we have to go back a couple days. Let's go back 2 days, and let's look at only our larger earthquakes. And then you're going to see that mid-range 5 that struck at Mount McKinley at Denali. I'll mark it in blue. And you'll see the other 5 that was downgraded to 4.7 that struck out here at the Aleutian Island chain. Go back a couple more days and you're going to see a 5.7 and 5.0, another 5 at the Kamchatka Peninsula, and a cluster of 5s and 5.7s at Japan. If you add up all the earthquakes back behind these 2 6s, guess what it equals? It equals the exact amount that we're looking at on the screen here now, a 6.3 plus a 6.2, which is a 6.5, by the way. Now, these struck a couple hours apart, so they're different earthquakes, but it is a total energy 6.5 plus the swarm. The swarm itself is actually going to equal even more, all right? So even more. So we're going to add in maybe another couple 5.0 earthquakes equal to on all these 2s, 3s, and 4s. So the total amount that struck across Japan and the Aleutian Island chain tallied up and struck right here on the back side of the North American plate. Now, this is going to push down to the east-southeast, and it already has, as of today, right after this large earthquake struck up here to the north, we saw a new earthquake down on the Craton edge. Now, look where the large earthquake is up here. It's in between our 2 sets of red arrows. Well, this is going to push down to the south and southeast, which means the areas to the south and southeast of this mid-range 6, which, ironically, we were looking for a mid-range 6 to strike right here, and we canceled the warning for it, so I'm going to consider this not part of that, and it's an earthquake forecast miss, quote-unquote, for me. However, I mean, if I can get it down to a region and down to a week, okay, I should be happy with that, but I'm trying to get it even closer than that. That being said, guys, this is a 6.5 pushing in on the slow slip location itself. It's going to push down the interior edge of the Craton where the red arrow is, going across Yellowstone, going down to Texas. Almost immediately, and almost at the same time this earthquake started to strike, we saw a 3.1 strike on the southern edge of this. So you can imagine immediate pressure put at the speed of an aircraft, of a spacecraft down to the south, and within just a little while, we see the fracking operations at Fort Stockton get hit. Now, there's going to be some people on here who want to debate whether or not fracking can cause earthquakes still. I understand there's still people that are catching up on the science on this, but this is already a settled debate, guys. I've got people that write me every time I talk about this. We're going to show you this operation and show you why it's vulnerable and why it got struck after the earthquake all the way up in Alaska. Yes, this earthquake here is related to the earthquake up in Alaska. So just taking a look at the area, you might say, well, it just looks like some desert. Well, no, guys. This is actually a huge pumping operation. I'll show it to you. The nearest wells are just like a mile away, and they're down here. Okay, so let me just zoom in on one of these. Here's a perfect example right here, and look at that. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, so the pumping operations become vulnerable because they're drill points in the edge of the craton. And every single one of these little pads is a different drill point. And they sometimes go down thousands of feet, other times just a few hundred. So they're like small hydraulic shock absorbers on the edge of the plate. And pressure was introduced rapidly, and it went immediately down the interior edge. Well, what's also going to happen on this is going to go into the Pacific Northwest and down into California. And we need to show you guys something here. We need to go over to the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network, University of Washington State real-time tremor map, and look at the tremors for the last 24 hours. This will let us know the smaller earthquakes where they're striking. And you're going to notice up to the north, we have hardly anything reported. But down to the south, we have a new cluster around Redding again, up to the west-northwest of Redding, and a new cluster back at Grants Pass in southwest Oregon. 2 new clusters. And we go back 48 hours, take a look at it. Then you'll see we have the 3 clusters. One at Wairika that we talked about last night, and Redding, and now Grants Pass. So this whole area is now swarming. It's spread, guys. It has spread. This is 48 hours. You can see it is spread. So what does it mean that it's spread? Well, the fact that it's spread around across maybe 100 miles, let's say it's actually more than that, from Grants Pass down to Redding. Let's get a measurement on that. Let's get our measurement tool and go up here to Grants Pass and measure down to Redding. Okay, where is Grants? There's Grants Pass. Grants Pass. Maybe it is 100 miles. There's Wairika. Here's Redding. 136 miles across right now. Okay, so 136 miles across, currently slow slipping. On top of that, we have new pressure that's coming in right now from the Pacific Northwest. It might take a day. It might take 2 days. It may even take 72 hours, 3 days. But it shouldn't take longer than that for this pressure up here to fully be introduced into the West Coast. It's coming from the west-northwest. The question is it going to re-excite up the slow slip event up here to the northwest, up in Vancouver Island or in Washington State? Or is it going to be leading to a single larger earthquake somewhere here in the northwest portion of California on the Juan de Fuca? Now, speaking of the Juan de Fuca, I brought up a graphic. Since I talk about it, and I've been talking about it for a while, there's some different graphics you can look at in relation to this. Now, I mean, some of them are going to come up on some weird websites, but, you know, the graphics themselves kind of speak for themselves. Let's see if I can get a big one on the screen here. I mean, this is Wikipedia, but here we have the coast of Washington and Oregon, and you'll see it says Gorda Plate and Juan de Fuca Plate. Okay, Gorda Plate, Juan de Fuca Plate. Now, they're showing it go one underneath the other. That's actually not happening, but they're butting up against each other. But it's kind of irrelevant at this point talking about that. But the Juan de Fuca zone, the fracture zone that we're talking about here, is compressed. It is now fully compressed. In other words, the north has moved across 150 miles from Olympic Peninsula up to central Vancouver. Then it stopped. Then it picked back up down here to the south in California. It is now spread 150 miles across this region here, which means that the area in between is under serious pressure to begin with because it's slow slipped on both sides, the north and the south side, and it's still ongoing on the south now. But now we're adding in a 6.5 new pressure coming in from the west-northwest. What's that going to do? Well, I told you guys last night, we're already looking for the threat of up to a 7, maybe even higher. I told you guys it could go higher, but I'm lowballing it. I'm lowballing it at a 7 for the next week, at least, until this slow slip event stops. Well, what do you think is going to happen with a new amount of pressure like this coming in? Obviously, we're going to see a new excitement that kicks back up on the Juan de Fuca, and it's going to be in one of the zones that was not struck by a current round of activity. So you can knock off Vancouver Island, and you can go just to the south, maybe right offshore. When we're talking about the magnitude that's going to come off this, guys, it's going into Northern California, and it's going to increase this entire slow slip event down to the south. I don't think there's any way around that the number of earthquakes that we're going to see maybe tomorrow and the day after in these locations are going to spike up through the roof. But at the same time, I'm thinking that the earthquake that's going to strike in here is going to be the big one that we were talking about yesterday. This is just going to add more punch to it. This could be the straw that broke the camel's back. The best case scenario is that this pressure transfers down into California and it causes like a swarm of 4s and maybe a 5. And then we'll see a new round of activity, 4s and near 5 strike all the way across California at the interior border of California, Nevada, and then terminate down here at the south with one single earthquake about the same size, about the 4 to 5. That would be best case scenario. Oh, and then it'll spread over to the east as well, over to the fracking operations, which I'll talk about in a second. But for the people on the West Coast, look, that's the best case scenario. Swarms of 4s and 5s, which you haven't seen in a while, spreading across maybe 500 miles to 600 miles. But I don't like giving you like the best case scenario and say, oh, that's what we're hoping for. This is what really should happen off this, is the pressure should be introduced into this silent zone. The middle of the silent zone should be hit, and it should be hit by the combined total of the total slow slip event on both sides plus this new earthquake. And if that's the case, then that would be taking it up above where we were in 2012. Now, 2012, the example I'm going to give you, the one I've been using for the last several weeks, is this spot right here at Vancouver Island experienced a slow slip across the entire island. It went on for 5 to 6 weeks, and it was accompanied by multiple 4 and 5.0 earthquakes. When I say multiple, like a handful. Let's say less than 10, but more than 5. Different 4 and 5s. When that finished, within 10 days later, I think, it was 10 days after the slow slip stopped here, there was a 7.7 here. Okay? So, I was already looking for this to be a large earthquake, but now introducing more pressure to the region, all that's going to do is increase, I think, our time scale. It's going to increase the speed at which this happens. It's pushing in on an area that's already under pressure. Does that make sense? So, what are we going to watch for over the next 7 days? Let's put it on a 7-day watch. Today is the 1st, so that takes us to the 8th, Monday the 8th. We're going to watch for the next 7 days, Northern California. And I know this is a long time to watch. I don't normally issue full 7-day watches for one region alone. But we're going to watch for the slow slip to increase. As the slow slip increases, just like yesterday when that 4 hit, the 4 already hit yesterday. You got to remember, the 4 hit yesterday in Northern California. But that could go up a whole notch and a half, 2 notches, and that takes us into the large earthquake realm. So I want you to be prepared from Northern California up to Central Oregon, off the coast, interior to the coast, on the Juan de Fuca fracture zone. So there's 2 spots. Let's show them to you again. See where our clusters are here? So if you live from, let's say, just north of Grants Pass, let's take it all the way up to Coos Bay. Let's take it all the way north to Coos Bay, south of Eugene. From Coos Bay all the way down to Redding in Eureka. Not Yreka, but Eureka, California, right at the coast. So that's a pretty big area. I hate to have to warn that size, but look, if it's going to be in the 7 range, whether it strikes off coast or whether it strikes on land, you're going to feel it across the entire area there. So I don't want you to be alarmed because a 7 isn't big enough. Even, let's use the 7.7 from 2012, from October 27, 2012, as the example, that it did cause a tsunami, but the tsunami it caused was only a few feet high. But it caused major shaking, it caused hot springs to drain fully, it caused all kinds of craziness up there, but nobody really lives there. Down here, it's a little bit different. Now, it is rural out here on some of these spots, and if there was a wave, it would be only a few feet high, so it's not going to be causing major coastal flooding of any kind, not like the Japan megaquake. But if I'm wrong on the magnitude on this, and it goes larger than 7.7, then we're really, or I'm using 7.7 from the 2012 example. If it goes larger than that, then we're really talking about a major quake here. So I don't have to, spell that out for you, what it means for you on the West Coast if we go larger than what happened in 2012. Now, the area that's moving right now is larger. The number of earthquakes is more, and now we have earthquakes on both sides. I want you to take a look where the location is, the halfway point. What is the halfway point between these two sets of earthquakes that you see on the screen right now? Well, if you don't go as the crow flies, because that'll bring you right out at Vancouver. You actually have to go as the fault zones kind of twist and turn and bend. You come down around, you go through all this zigzag of the Juan de Fuca, and then you come over to the Gorda, and then you go down into California. The halfway point comes out more like right here off the coast of Oregon. Even though there's a longer distance, it appears, to the north, you have to straighten this all out down to the south, and if you were to straighten that out, it would take it about the same distance. So the halfway point comes off the coast of Oregon to me, but I have to include Northern California because that's where the bottom of the slow slip is, the southern tip of the slow slip. So it could move at the southern tip, could move at the center. We have to warn those two spots. The spot that already moved to the north, I would watch for small swarms to increase at Vancouver, but I think it's going to pop right over here because look what it already did. It already pushed all the way down to Texas. So it already excited things down to Texas. That lets you know it's like a first sudden foreshock, just boom, pushes the whole plate. And then that lets you know something big's coming, because imagine the force that it takes to push all of Canada and the United States to the southeast. Imagine what kind of force that is. That's a huge force. So to my viewer who lives up there, Zen Sense out of Whitehorse, Yukon Territory, I wrote you today, and it's postmarked today, this morning, I guess right before the earthquake, or right at the same time of the earthquake, and then lo and behold, we got your package today, and you live right there. I hope you're okay. Hope you're doing okay. Now, that's the earthquake that struck in the United States. There's more activity we need to talk about. It's not just here in the States, guys. Off the coast